I should point out that these efficacies are wildly all over the board. It depends on what the metric is. So 90% efficacy when it's high like that, usually it's prevents individuals from getting mild symptoms. But in some of these vaccines have lower efficacy, like you may see AstraZeneca and Johnson being reported as in the 60s in terms of efficacy. But when you factor in the likelihood of getting hospitalized or seriously ill, then the numbers push up. And so again, be careful when you look at these efficacy rates and really understand what they're trying to tell you. So again, this 90% efficacy is closer to the value of prevention of serious illness. And I think that the number is quite a bit lower for if your metric is just to eliminate mild symptoms. So these nucleic acid type vaccines are the new and sort of exciting versions of the vaccines that have come out, and they're the ones that are leading the charge. The Pfizer, BioNTech, and the Moderna vaccine, as I talked about before, is a collaboration with Fauci's NIAID. And so again, not surprising, having that kind of weight behind you has put this little known company, Moderna, at the forefront of vaccine manufacture. So the basic gist of these: here's a DNA vaccine, and again, this protected DNA, which has a region that encodes the coronavirus spike gene, can be injected. And again, you can use electroporation, which again is sending a shock through the arm or wherever to cause pore formation in the cell membrane, so that the vaccine DNA will enter and then actually be transcribed into messenger RNA and then translated into proteins. So in this particular case, though, the focus is here on the RNA vaccines, because that's what actually is being developed for the COVID pandemic. Both Pfizer, BioNTech, and Fauci NIAID Moderna vaccine are RNA vaccines, and so it works in a pretty straightforward way. You have RNA encoding the COVID-2 spike protein surrounded in a lipid coating, and I talked about the ingredients in a few slides ago, that a lot of them are various kinds of lipids, because RNA is a notoriously unstable molecule and therefore has to be very well protected, or else it will degrade very quickly. So again, the lipid-coated viral RNA is injected, and then that lipid coat can fuse with the membrane to facilitate uptake. Now, this is, again, free DNA, and so that's why you might use a electroporation approach to create pores so the DNA can slip through the pores. Here you've got a lipid coating, so the lipid coating can undergo a membrane fusion event to facilitate the release of viral RNA into the cell. These guys can then be translated into proteins and then displayed on the surface of the host cells, where the immune system will go crazy and eventually provoke, again, T and B cells to fight the infection, and hopefully a memory response as well, which we believe there is a pretty significant memory response even to COVID-2. So some of the details here: again, mRNA vaccine delivered in doses. The cold storage issue is a big one, though. Again, -20. These are, this can be range from normal household refrigerator temperature right down to specialized equipment that only labs have. It's pretty expensive, right around $35 to $50 for a 2-shot complete dose, which can be out of reach for many people. It has a very high efficacy, though, according to the studies, and so that's a really important plus. There's also a VLP type approach. This is a Canadian group using Medicago, these tobacco plants, I believe, to propagate these virus-like particles. And so the virus-like particles are propagated with essentially a shell that mimics the COVID-2 structure. So they're completely harmless because they don't have a genome in them, and then they can be injected. And then again, they're internalized by immune system cells, and then the immune system cells display to T cells, and T cells to B cells to create the immune response. These guys are earlier on in the process, though, and I don't know if they're going to be able to catch up. The protein-based vaccines are also becoming more common. Novavax has a version of a COVID-2 vaccine that has a proprietary adjuvant and booster combination. The cool thing about them, again, is these are refrigerator storage vaccines. So the spike proteins themselves can be purified as a cocktail, and then in addition to, in this particular case, the M proteins that are also part of the virus structure can be injected as a cocktail, and that will then stimulate an immune response. So a little bit, here's just an overview of the Moderna cost. So the good news is that right now the prices are reasonable, around $20 a dose, which comes to about $40 per patient. And again, they have huge contracts, so there's a lot of money at stake, and it shouldn't surprise you then when there's a lot of really serious fear-based messaging. Stay indoors, don't go outside even to exercise, and those kinds of ridiculous things that really fly in the face of good public health policy. So it really causes me to be a little cynical and wonder if there's some sort of underlying reason why reasonable public health officials would actually be telling people that, knowing that these viruses are not transmitting very well outdoors in open spaces. So again, this is just interesting aspect of it, the money that's going to be made for these products. Another one. So the final question then is, when will vaccines be available? And they're already coming online now. There have been millions of doses administered. Who will get them and in what order? That's a huge problem. We've got teachers unions saying we're not going back to school until we're all vaccinated, and you've got obviously frontline people, including police officers and so forth, that probably should be first in line. So a lot of people are scrumming to get ahead, and so it's a mess. But generally, what's happening right now is frontline individuals and the elderly. And then eventually we'll move into a next tier where additional frontline individuals and we'll lower the age range and so forth. So we end up in these different phases of vaccination. The big issue of side effects and overall effectiveness. Again, we won't know this for a few years. Side effects, we're starting to see some, but it's minimal, right? And so again, we have to weigh these side effects against the real threat of the virus especially to certain groups of individuals. And so I suspect that the scale will be tipped in favor of the risks are acceptable. We need to continue with this and get hundreds of millions of doses into individuals. There's always this big question about lasting immunity, or are we going to require boosters? And so there's already grumblings about this. There's lots of evidence, as I talk about in a different lecture, for lasting immunity to this particular virus. But again, the studies, this is a relatively new on the scene virus, and so the studies are only a year old. And so anything that we say past a year is pretty much conjecture. I'm sure that the vaccine companies would love it if this thing just didn't go away. If they could just keep selling boosters. That makes perfect sense from a business model. You wouldn't want to just be a one and done kind of company where you make a vaccine and then it's no longer useful and then you just get rid of it or whatever, put it in the back of the freezer and don't make any money off of it anymore. So again, the idea that boosters could potentially be required, especially in light of some of the variants that are popping up. Who knows? But we'll see. That remains to be seen. But I will tell you 100%, I know that the vaccine makers would love it if there was justification for booster shots year after year. Again, who will want it? A lot of people don't want it. Many more do. And so that's always going to be a bit of a controversy. But the last line, the last bullet point, really can make a lot of that arguing moot, as we did with masks early on. A lot of us, and myself included, thought that masking was ridiculous, especially in low risk environments, out in the soccer field or whatever. But the decision was made for us in many cases. And the same thing will most likely happen with vaccines. There's already a discussion about vaccine passports and requiring those to fly. And that's gotten a lot of people up in arms, especially individuals that are frightened of vaccines for whatever reason. So it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out.